It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The Princess of Wales returns to public duties after her cancer diagnosis, joining the royal family at Trooping the Colour. Keir Starmer pledges thousands of extra appointments for patients, but avoids saying where Labour will find the extra funding to boost the NHS. The Home Secretary demands an urgent explanation as a police car is filmed ramming a runaway cow. We speak to the Ukrainian soldiers who say fighting Russia is taking a devastating toll on their mental health. And England expects. Gareth Southgate says he and his players are ready for Euro 2024. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. The Princess of Wales has returned to public duties for the first time since her cancer diagnosis. Kate joined the royal family for the King's birthday parade, observing Trooping the Colour and the flypast over Buckingham Palace. It follows an update from the Princess about her health, in which she said she still had months of treatment ahead and was not out of the woods yet. Our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills reports.
For a family who have been through so much, it was time to face the public together. The King and Queen leading in a carriage. His cancer diagnosis meaning he couldn't join Prince William, Princess Anne and Prince Edward on horseback this year. And then the wait was over. Finally, again, we saw the Princess of Wales. Not hiding away, but happily smiling at the cameras. Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis in the glass carriage with her. Like any mother, she wanted to be there for them. And the crowds could not have been happier to see her.
It's great to see her back. I think the public is behind her. We just want her to recover and obviously respect her privacy at the same time.
Absolutely brilliant. Lovely to see Kate and all the children. It was really good.
Absolutely wonderful. Yeah, it was quite emotional, to be honest. She waved and smiled, didn't she? And I got a little bit teary, to be honest. It was wonderful to see her, it really was.
It was the King's birthday parade, but inevitably the Princess was always going to be centre of attention. But for both of them, it's again shown how the comfort of family has been so important, like it is for all cancer patients, despite the very public lives that they live. On Horse Guards Parade, the household division were gathered. The King as Colonel-in-Chief taking his place on the dais for his official birthday parade and the Irish Guard trooping the colour. His own cancer diagnosis had made events like this uncertain, but this again was a display of his own determination to be seen. It is easy to forget he is still having treatment. Like his daughter-in-law in the balcony above, her focus today on watching her children, especially, of course, Louis. And then it did rain on their parade. In fact, the heavens opened. The soldiers, the crowds, and those royals on horseback drenched as they returned for the final salute. It's not clear if it was a last-minute change to the soundtrack, but a rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow seemed to pay off. Blue sky appearing as they made their way onto the balcony for a rare moment in the year when they can all be together. Princess Charlotte nudging little Louis to be on best behaviour. As their favourite, the flypast, was saved by a break in the weather. This was a moment about the King and the Princess of Wales, father-in-law and daughter-in-law, trying to stay positive. Both still on a journey to recovery that they've wanted to share with the nation. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News at Buckingham Palace.
Sir Keir Starmer has promised that patients would be offered an extra 40,000 out-of-hours NHS appointments each week if Labour win the election. He insisted that the policy would be paid for by closing tax loopholes, but when questioned by journalists, he declined to spell out how he'd pay for the rest of the party's pledges about the health service. Our political correspondent Gurpreet Narwan reports.
The NHS, traditionally solid ground for the Labour Party. Sir Keir Starmer is making big promises, but will he put his money where his mouth is? The party says it wants to deliver an extra 40,000 appointments a week and to clear the backlog of those waiting for over 18 weeks for elective treatment. But we still don't know how much the NHS will receive in overall funding under a Labour government.
What we've set out in our manifesto is the first step, which is the down payment on the change that we need, and that is the 40,000 appointments each and every week to reduce the waiting list. It is a first step. We've also set out the money for the mental health professionals that we need in our communities.
But patients here at the Bassett Law Hospital in Nottinghamshire are calling for fundamental reform. Some have been waiting years for treatment.
I paid in national insurance for many years, and I've had to wait all that time. And, it's the same old politicians, going around the factories with hard hats on. And it's so phony, It's old hat, in my opinion. We need to get real, that's what I said to him,
I understand the restraints that the NHS has got upon it. It's stretched to its limit, and it needs more funding, and it does affect people's lives. And I sometimes don't see that people see that effect. When you've got your family, upset for you, it breaks your heart.
And most people in Britain agree. 60% say they want spending on the NHS to increase, even if it means their personal taxes would rise. But both parties are talking down the prospect of tax rises.
I don't find 6 out of 10 people want to pay more tax. I find they want to bring their taxes down. They want better public services. They understand the challenge in the NHS. They also understand it's got record funding and record numbers of doctors and nurses, but we're up against a huge rise in demand, particularly under the pandemic, which is really, really difficult.
Waiting lists, appointment times, junior doctors' strikes. The challenges facing the next government are big and expensive. People here know that, and they want their politicians to be honest about it too. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News, Nottinghamshire.
Well, our political correspondent Rob Powell joins us now from Westminster. Rob, big plans for the NHS from Labour, but not a lot of clarity about how they plan to pay for everything.
Yeah, Barbara, I think as with many parts of the Labour approach, they've done a pretty comprehensive job in diagnosing the problem, but whether the remedy really fixes that problem, well, I think that's another question. When it comes to the NHS, I think the first issue is clearly around staffing. If you're going to provide 40,000 extra appointments and double the number of scanners being used in the NHS, well, you need people to be able to staff those appointments and operate those scanners. You need a motivated and willing workforce. So how will they approach the large number of vacancies that we have in the NHS? How will they solve some of the ongoing strikes and industrial disputes with junior doctors? Well, one answer to both those questions is money, but that brings us on to the second problem Labour may face. There's not going to be a whole load of that knocking around within government if Labour are to make it into power. Initially, the extra cash they're planning on putting into the NHS will come from tackling tax avoidance, but I think in the long term, it really rests alongside its broader public spending plans that they hope that generating economic growth will bring in tax revenues and that will generate extra money to plug into public services. Look, none of that is guaranteed revenue, though, and they have blocked off a load of big ways to raise money by saying they won't raise things like income tax, national insurance or VAT. That's Labour. As for the Conservatives, it's been a bit of a quieter day, campaign-wise anyway. Rishi Sunak tied up with prime ministerial duties. We saw him at Trooping of the Colour this morning. This afternoon, he's been at a Ukraine summit in Switzerland. But I think if the party had hoped that this sort of break in the action will have given them some sort of reset, they may be disappointed. We've had another poll drop this afternoon that doesn't put reform ahead of the Tories, as YouGov did yesterday, but it does show the gap between the Conservatives and Labour widening still. So I think the approach in this second half of the campaign from the Tories is almost going to be to focus less on their own policy and what they're saying and try to focus minds as they see it on the dangers of a Labour government. I think they're going to be talking about some of those gaps we've been discussing in Labour policy around the NHS and crucially trying to link that back to their central attack line that they believe Labour would put up taxes. But be in no doubt, that strategy comes from a desperate place. And I think at this point in the campaign, it may actually be solely designed to limit the damage.
Rob Powell, our political correspondent, joining us from Westminster. Rob, thank you. Well, the Home Secretary has demanded an explanation after footage emerged of Surrey police officers using their car to ram an escaped cow. Video shared widely online shows the animal being hit twice in a residential street in Feltham. The cow's owner has told Sky News that the animal is expected to make a full recovery. From there, Sky's Rachel Venables reports.
Oh my God.
After hours on the run...
Stun him! Stun him!
This was the moment police used a car to ram and try to pin down an escaped calf.
It was literally just in front of that car, so it was literally there. It was right in front of the house.
I was absolutely disgusted this morning when I saw the videos because there was no need for them to do that. That calf was no threat to anyone. It wasn't trying to stampede anyone. It looked frightened. Why didn't they just herd it into a garden?
The Home Secretary was quick to share his concern, writing on X, "I can think of no reasonable need for this action. I've asked for a full, urgent explanation for this. It appears to be unnecessarily heavy-handed."
Over several hours, this cow was running loose through these streets, and police say they grew extremely concerned for the safety of the public. They say they tried a number of methods unsuccessfully to capture it before deciding that using a police car to stop it was their only option.
The cow suffered a large cut to its leg and is being looked after by a vet, while the force has referred itself to the police watchdog. In a statement, Chief Inspector Sam Adcock said, "I know this has caused distress and I'd like to thank the community for their concern. The decision to use the police car is one that was only taken after other methods to stop the cow had failed." But for policing commentator Graham Wetton, the footage is deeply worrying.
As a former police officer, I looked at it this afternoon. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe a police vehicle had been used in such a way to stop an animal. And it's the context and detail about what other options Surrey had tried, what had failed, and why this was almost like the last resort, the last course of action.
It's easy to see why this sort of footage could cause such distress. Once more, a viral video placing police tactics under intense scrutiny. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has told an international conference aimed at ending the war with Russia that the world wants peace. The summit in Switzerland aims to plan the first steps towards a resolution to the conflict in Ukraine. But China is not in attendance after Russia was frozen out of proceedings. Mr. Zelensky insisted the progress can still be made.
At the second peace summit, we can fix the real end of the war. Now we are starting this path together. We must prove that the united world is a world of peace, a world that knows how to act correctly. Thank you for attention. Thank you for participating in the summit. I hope for fruitful work together, of course, together. We all need peace. Slava Ukraini.
Well, as President Zelensky works to win support from world leaders, for Ukrainian soldiers returning from the front line, it's a very different kind of support they're in need of. For some, the psychological trauma of the war has taken a heavy toll on their mental health. They've been speaking to our security and defense editor, Deborah Haynes.
Все те, що робить агресор, те, як він намагається нас знищити, те, як гибнуть побратими, це дуже сильно впливає на емоційний стан.
Maxim is among a growing number of Ukrainian troops suffering the mental scars of war.
В голові куча думок про те, що було, тому я від цього не мог трохи відійти.
Just back from the front line, he receives support at a makeshift centre for psychological trauma.
В нашій ситуації не завжди є можливість побачити родину. І коли ти йдеш на завдання, то є різні ситуації, що ти можеш не повернути. Боєць, який розбитий зсередини, не може виконувати якісно ці завдання і тим самим може зробити ще трохи шкоди.
Treating the physical injuries of Russia's invasion is a vital task. But some Ukrainian commanders are also trying to respond to their soldiers' more hidden wounds, which can be just as damaging if untreated. Ilya is a psychologist who works at this support hub. Set up in eastern Ukraine by 41st Brigade. Some 10 soldiers at a time can stay here for a few days for assessments.
What is the danger if you don't tackle these hidden wounds?
Якщо не займатися, то можемо, якщо це в плані військовослужбовця, то можемо втратити військовослужбовця і у нього почнуться проблеми помімо себе, він буде наносити шкоду іншим.
But with a shortage of troops on the front line, only those displaying the most serious mental injuries are sent away for further help. The rest must return to the fight. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Experts have told Sky News that consumers should remain cautious following an outbreak of E. coli. Retailers have been forced to recall lines of prepackaged sandwiches and salads after 211 suspected cases were identified across the UK. Sky's Greg Milam reports.
Up and down our high streets, the concern about this outbreak of E. coli is having an impact. Dozens of products removed from the shelves at most of the big-name supermarkets, and so far no certainty about precisely where it's come from and when it might pass. The theory that sandwiches could be to blame has led to products made by this company, Greencore, the world's largest manufacturer of sandwiches, being taken off the shelves. Other suppliers have also recalled products. The Food Standards Agency says it's narrowed down the possibility to a small number of salad leaf products in sandwiches, wraps and rolls. It says a complex investigation continues. And while it does, the industry association that represents those who make and distribute our sandwiches says the decision to recall products was the only option.
We have the most amazing chilled food industry in this country. We're way ahead of the rest of the world. And we operate in very clinically controlled conditions to make products for people to consume. But these bacteria can creep in from somewhere, and particularly in something like this, they come from without any warning. So we just have to overreact, really, to be on the safe side.
The Food Standards Agency says the recall is a precautionary step. It covers products with date codes up to and including June the 16th. And the hope is that whatever has caused the outbreak will have soon been used up. But until they can identify it exactly, no one can be certain. It is a particularly nasty strain of E. coli that can cause diarrhoea, stomach cramps and fever. Symptoms can last 2 weeks. The most serious cases can be life-threatening. The UK Health Security Agency has said 211 cases were logged between May the 25th and June the 11th, the number expected to have risen. Of those, 147 were in England, with 27 in Wales and 35 in Scotland.
The main advice is, just like the food standards and the UK HSA say, we need to practice good kitchen hygiene and good personal hygiene. So that means just making sure that your food is cooked properly, especially at barbecue time, and also don't mix any raw and cooked food. And also, if you're using the bathroom, make sure you always wash your hands.
For now, anyone who's bought one of the recalled products has been advised to return them. Anyone showing any symptoms of E. coli infection advised to contact their GP or NHS 111. Greg Milam, Sky News.
8 Israeli soldiers are reported to have been killed in an explosion in southern Gaza. They're believed to have been driving in a convoy following an overnight offensive against Hamas and died inside an armored vehicle in the city of Rafah. The IDF says it's the deadliest attack on its forces since January. Meanwhile, the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza said today that the fighting in Gaza has now killed more than 37,000 Palestinians. Millwall Football Club has announced the sudden death of their #1 goalkeeper, Matthias Sarkic, at the age of 26. Sarkic was born in Grimsby and played for several English clubs during his career. He died while on international duty in Montenegro. The former Arsenal and Everton footballer Kevin Campbell has died at the age of 54 following a short illness. Announcing the news, Arsenal said Campbell was adored by everyone at the club. The England manager, Gareth Southgate, says he hopes everyone will come to enjoy the football in their opening Euro 2024 game with Serbia tomorrow. The match has been deemed high risk by German authorities, with concerns that hooligans might try to cause disruption. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris reports now from Dusseldorf.
A weekend in Westphalia for the Three Lions. No trouble here, but police on alert. Split between Dusseldorf and Gelsenkirchen, where England's match against Serbia is deemed a high risk. The last time England fans travelled in such force, it was a story of hooliganism and humiliation at Euro 2016. These Euros are tests for England on and off the pitch.
It's going to be harder than we expect, I think.
100%.
So they've got the instant team. We'll be surprised. I think they'll come at us more than we expect, but we'll get the result. We'll win. Southgate, you're the one!
Confidence restored by Gareth Southgate. But will this fourth tournament in charge be his last?
1, 2, 3, 4!
If he wins it, no. If he doesn't, then it probably is his last tournament, yeah.
So everybody says get rid of him. I'm happy with that, but tell me who's going to replace him, who's better.
Win the trophy and he could walk away anyway. Fall short and he could be the fall guy.
I hate to put pressure on all the coaches, but it could be the last tournament for all of them. So this is the world we're in. I'm probably more relaxed about it because I've been to 3. I know exactly what it involves. I know the events you have to deal with.
They were semi-finalists at the 2018 World Cup, losing finalists at the next Euros at Wembley. And they went home from Qatar 2022 after the quarter-finals. Only half of that World Cup squad is in Germany, led by captain Harry Kane, the constant.
Going into this tournament, we know, in past tournaments we've done a lot of things well and we've made, the country proud and we've had good tournaments, but ultimately we're here to win it and there will be nothing better for us and the nation itself if we do that.
England hoping an aggressive approach will unsettle Serbia here on Sunday night. And now from Gelsenkirchen, this is a focal point of the policing. England fans are packed here into the old town of Dusseldorf with 260 bars in the area. The start of a Euros journey. Will it end being crowned kings of the continent next month? Rob Harris, Sky News, Dusseldorf.
Let's get the rest of the sport now with James.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
60, 61, perfect. 64, 65, 66.
Let's go, guys! Come on!
It's a tough session, this, because they've just been in like 20-odd degree heat in South Africa, and then everything works so efficiently out there.
Should we just explain it's 7 degrees and it's Manchester?
It's Manchester on a cold, windy day. Coming to this environment, it's grim. But this is what makes you strong. If you can run these times here, what are you going to run when you're in, you know, these faster races abroad in nice weather? Makes you tough, being in the north.
And there is no better way to describe Keely Hodgkinson. A tougher, more determined competitor will be a challenge to find.
Ready, 2, 1, go.
Add world-class talent, and there's the stardust needed to make an Olympic champion.
Looking at the Mo Farahs and the Jess Ennis, it's like, how do they do it every year, over and over again? And I look back now and think, oh, you have done it now for a good couple of years, but it's just keeping that going, I think, is the one thing I'd like to do, and just keep reeling in the medals.
Hodgkinson shot to prominence as an 800-metre runner at the Tokyo Olympics, taking silver.
So far, I've medalled at every championships I've ever been to, which is quite hard to do.
3 women dominate the 800 metres. Hodgkinson, Athing Mu from the USA, and Kenya's Mary Mora.
Unfortunately, I've been second every time.
Easy.
Now I'm at a point where I'm like, right, well, how do we get that gold? And I think every year I've gotten closer, and I'm in better shape. So hopefully when that all comes together in a few weeks, I'll be better than I even was before. So that's a great position to be in going into Paris. But I do actually think it's all in the mind. The little tiny split seconds that you make, you really just need to believe and kind of run a bit fearless, because if you don't risk it, you won't get the rewards.
On your marks, set, go.
Coaches Trevor Painter and wife Jenny Meadows, who was a seriously good 800-metre runner herself, know Keely well. She's part of the family.
I just really gelled with Jenny and Trevor when I first met them when I was like 15. So I knew them way before I joined their setup here. And I just think Trevor's probably said before, like, his focus is happy athlete is a fast athlete. So I do try and create that environment, but I think we have a really good relationship that he knows when he's annoying me, and he knows when I'm not in the mood for his dad jokes.
Keely's like our eldest daughter. And all the athletes are, you know, we treat them all like that, and we'll do as much as we can for them, like any parent would.
So that's the buzz for you?
Yeah, I just like seeing them grow and develop as athletes.
Stand-in mum and dad, or parents or family when you need them?
Older sister,
oh,
not mum.
Yes. older sister, granddad. No, what they like, Keely?
We had that one, so I say, I just something with my mum.
Mum, actually, so yeah, I could technically be your.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by political editor at the Daily Mirror, John Stevens, and journalist and broadcaster Carolyn Quinn. Welcome both. Now, among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Mirror, the headline, Kate, to have you back, as the princess makes her first public appearance since her cancer diagnosis. We'll be right back.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I'm based in Belfast, a city transformed by peace, but still struggling with its past. Politically, the two sides are as far apart as ever, and it's over that question of who has sovereignty in Northern Ireland, the very issue that's been the source of tension here for generations. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 25 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
We help you understand the world with us.
Today,
we have reached an agreement with the Conservative Party on support for government in Parliament.
We already know what the government gets out of this deal. What exactly does the DUP get out of it? Well, £1.5 billion. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. You can't live in a place like this and not appreciate the environment.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. First, though, our top stories. The Princess of Wales has returned to public duties for the first time since her cancer diagnosis. Sir Keir Starmer has promised that patients would be offered an extra 40,000 out-of-hours NHS appointments each week if Labour win the election. And the Home Secretary has demanded an explanation after footage emerged of Surrey police officers using their car to ram an escaped cow. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the political editor of the Daily Mirror, John Stevens, and the journalist and broadcaster, Carolyn Quinn. Welcome both. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Princess of Wales takes centre stage in the Mail on Sunday, with Troop in the Colour branded the day that lifted the nation's hearts. The Sun on Sunday says the princess back on parade is a super trooper. The Sunday Telegraph goes with Our Fair Lady lifts the nation's spirits. She also takes the lead for the Sunday Express, who say it's Kate to see you again. And for the Sunday Mirror, it's Kate to have you back. Meanwhile, the general election is the lead for the Observer, with a warning that the NHS will be worse off no matter who wins. In the Sunday Times, there is an interview with the Prime Minister in which he reveals the strength he draws from his Hindu faith, as a new poll predicts a 262-seat majority for Labour. And finally, in the Daily Star Sunday, a psychic's prediction that football is coming home. We'll see if they're right. And the reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by the political editor at the Daily Mirror, John Stevens, and the journalist and broadcaster, Carolyn Quinn. Great to have you here this evening. Well, unsurprisingly, pictures of the Princess of Wales dominate most of the papers, certainly the front pages. Let's just start by looking at the Mail. It's lovely to see you too, Kate. Going to the Sunday Telegraph, just showing some of those front pages. Our Fair Lady lifts our nation's spirits, and similar pictures, and the one the Sunday Telegraph taken, of course, from the balcony. It was a special occasion, wasn't it, John? I mean, the Troop in the Colour itself, but seeing her after all these months.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable seeing how well Kate is looking, considering what she's been through health-wise. I mean, at these events through the last few years, I mean, Kate always looks stunning. Her outfits always look perfect. But, I mean, she looks so well today that you'd never know that she'd been battling this illness. And that statement that Kensington Palace put out on Friday evening, with her being quite honest, saying some days she feels quite well, some days she doesn't feel that well. So I think that, yeah, it is just brilliant that she's clearly looking so well in these pictures. And it must be so hard for her when she knows there's going to be so much scrutiny about how she looks. There's always scrutiny about how she looks. To be able to go out there, you know that you're going to have all these cameras on you at all these points. It must be really hard, and it is great that she's looking so well.
And just to be back with the family again, doing what her family say she really wants to do, which is being in public with her children, her husband, and, of course, with the King, who himself has had a cancer diagnosis. Most families going through cancer know the pain of it. To have two people within your family unit, however privileged, however rich, it shows that cancer can strike. And I think that seems to be the thing that comes through in these papers, the inspirational picture that she's provided.
And also, in a way, sharing the King's special day, because, of course, it's his official birthday. How important do you think it was, Carolyn, for the image of the royal family right now, to have that picture on the balcony with the family there?
Oh, I think, you know, the uplifting in the nation's spirits is something that a lot of the headlines draw on, because it's almost a feeling of back to normality. Things aren't normal, of course, for Kate. She's made that clear, that she's still got months of treatment to go. And it's interesting, in the Express, Carol Sikora, who's a world-renowned former director of a World Cancer Programme, he said what Kate has done is a tremendous boost to all cancer patients in Britain at the moment. They realise they're not alone, and people with cancer are listening to what she says about it. She's a role model for it. Interestingly, though, for the kids, for Prince Louis, it was sort of business as usual.
Classic.
Yawning. When is this all going to be over?
Still kids.
So back to normal.
And of course, the rain, I mean, which was a bit of an annoyance today, but it didn't dampen the spirits. OK, let's look at some other stories. Let's go to the Sunday Times and look at the front page of the Sunday Times, where there is an interview with Rishi Sunak, where he talks about his Hindu faith. And the headline there, "Faith and Duty Guide Me Through My Election Trials." John, what do you make of, I guess, what he's mentioning and the strategy? We're now halfway through the election campaign.
Yeah, we're halfway through. I think is it 21, 22, maybe 23 days now gone, about 20 left to go, about 3 weeks. And so we've got a quite personal interview from Rishi Sunak here. We're used to him talking about policy. We're used to him talking about the strains of Downing Street. But here he is talking about his Hindu faith. And one of the things it notes in the Sunday Times article is it's quite unusual for politicians to talk about their faith like this. Obviously, everyone remembers Alistair Campbell with Tony Blair saying, "We don't do God." But here is the Prime Minister talking about his faith, talking about how his kind of feeling of duty, part of that comes from his Hindu upbringing. I think it's quite interesting. I think that at a time of elections, people do want to hear about policy, but they do also want to hear about who is this person I'm picking as Prime Minister to go through the door of number 10. I think they're interested in both Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, both what they're doing for the country, but also their personal character.
And also the fact that he has talked about it himself, trying to bring it to the fore himself, rather than it being forced from him. As you say, Tony Blair did talk about God. Well, he didn't really want to, did he? But I think it was Jeremy Paxman, wasn't it, that asked him at the time of the Iraq War if he and George Bush prayed together. And I don't think he welcomed the probing into his religious beliefs at that point. But here we have Rishi Sunak making clear that he does draw strength from his faith. And, of course, he has great trials at the moment.
He definitely needs some help at the moment.
He needs some help.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, let's go to the Sunday Telegraph. Front page there, comments from a former cabinet minister. So looking at the Sunday Telegraph, the headline is, "I share voters' frustrations, but we face Labour dictatorship." Now, this is Robert Jenrick, former cabinet minister. He, of course, resigned last year over the Rwanda bill. And, I mean, it's this new angle, isn't it, Carolyn, that some people are saying the Tories have almost given up and just trying to minimise the damage. What do you think of that strategy?
Well, when you hear somebody like Robert Jenrick, we heard Suella Braverman as well making her comments about what the party should do in response to Nigel Farage. And there have been warnings, haven't there, about a Labour landslide, and don't vote for Farage because that will just give Keir Starmer an even greater, easier run at number 10. But I don't know if you think this, John, but there is certainly a lot of tilting to the future, isn't there? Robert Jenrick, Suella Braverman, both potential Tory leaders in the future. Once the election is passed, they may be accepting that they've lost it, but there are certain battles ahead.
Oh, definitely. You can see people like Robert Jenrick, like Suella Braverman, as you say, already positioning themselves in case a vacancy comes up, which is looking more unlikely it will do. I think also for Robert Jenrick personally, if you look back at the Sunday Times, they've got a poll, they've got one of these MRP polls where they can map seat by seat. And they're actually suggesting that Robert Jenrick is at danger of losing his seat in Newark. And that's a seat who he won it in a by-election, and that was a by-election where it looked like UKIP might be able to beat the Tories. And so I wonder if his comments on Farage and saying if you vote for reform, you're kind of giving Keir Starmer a blank cheque. I wonder if part of that is not just about jockeying for the leadership, it's about trying to save his own skin in that seat.
Yeah, because Penny Mordaunt, Penny Mordaunt, who also risks losing her seat, called Nigel Farage a Labour enabler, didn't she, during that seven-way debate earlier in the week. And, I mean, they clearly are spooked by the Farage effect. Where it goes from here, and, as I say, they're just looking to the future, really, aren't they? Those of them that remain in the Commons will then be battling out for the leadership.
And what do you make of the Farage effect, especially since we've seen these polls over the past few days, one that put, in fairness, just by 1 percentage point, but 1 point, Reform 1 point ahead of the Tories. How do you think the next 3 weeks will pan out?
Well, he will be enjoying every minute of this. As soon as that one poll came out to say that his party Reform were 1 point ahead of the Conservatives, he made a point of announcing it on television. He's been saying that he will be the opposition to a Labour government. He has been a sore in the Conservative side since 2014. You know, he has been a constant menace as far as they're concerned. And he's been an influencer on policy, and he's doing it again.
I think there's a real problem for the Tories here that obviously Reform could cause real damage to them, not in taking seats, but be able to take away votes in marginal seats and be able to make the difference between the Tories or Labour win them. I think that there will be a problem, though, if they do win some seats. And I don't think this MRP poll today was suggesting they might win 7 seats. Yeah. I would be sceptical about that, but it is a slight problem. It might be a bit like Japanese knotweed. Once they're in, you can't stop them.
Let's take a look at some of the policies or sort of, you know, what might happen. The Observer front page. Both parties will leave the NHS worse off than the austerity years. The NHS, obviously, a huge focus of this election. What does this article actually say, John?
Yeah, so this is some research by the Nuffield Trust, which is a think tank, and they've looked through the different parties' manifestos, and they are talking about how the percentage increase in spending on the NHS that they think that they suggest, and they're suggesting that whichever party is victorious, that the amount of spending increase on the NHS isn't going to be big enough. And I think this is a bit problematic for Labour, that the party is very good at pointing out the problems in the NHS. We're all very aware that there are problems with people ringing 999, people getting ambulances, cancer waiting times. There are so many problems with the NHS, but obviously Labour have had the problem that they haven't been willing to promise big increases in taxes because they know if they did that, they would be completely hammered by the Tories.
And the independent experts, the IFS, for instance, they've been talking about a conspiracy of silence from both parties because they're saying we won't raise income tax, national insurance, VAT, corporation tax. I think Keir Starmer today was saying we won't raise capital gains tax either. So the question is, where do you find the money from to fund your changes? And also, if you are going to talk about the NHS facing severe cuts, the NHS is supposed to be one of the protected departments when we're looking to the future. So what on earth does that mean for the unprotected departments? How much will they have to bear the brunt of public spending cuts?
Carolyn, John, stay with us. Coming up, among the stories we will be discussing this on the front of the Sunday Times. Their headline, Fury after police car rams calf. We'll explain later.
It's catastrophic, and you said it's more than a year now, and actually the situation is rapidly deteriorating. Right now there's a huge battle ongoing in North Darfur in the city of Al Fashir, and we are seeing relentless bombing of the city, civilian infrastructures being destroyed, people having to flee but having nowhere to flee. And we are seeing also massacres in the middle of the country. Just last week, 100 of civilians were killed by the Rapid Support Force just in one day, in one village. And on top of this, we're looking at the largest hunger crisis in the world right now unfolding. It's really terrible. My colleague just left Al Fashir last week, and it was a very treacherous journey. It was a horrible journey, and he had stayed, the longest time there. And he was telling me people were queuing in the street to get water. There was huge shortages of water, of food. Nobody could reach to the hospital. A lot of wounded actually never made it to the hospital during the fighting. And the warring parties are completely not respecting any civilian infrastructures. The hospital was raided, and this is North Darfur, but across the entire Darfur, which is as big as Spain, people are struggling. My team's underground. I think people who cannot afford even a meal a day. They're eating soil. They're eating leaves. Women have to sell themselves, their body for food. We have people who have to sell their, they live in shelters, shelters like you see on the picture, and they have to sell their roof in order to afford a meal. The situation is really bad, and you have people who are either going to be killed by violence or killed by hunger. The gravity of the situation compared to the attention that the international community is given is unspeakable. I have no word to express how much neglected Sudan is. I mean, the international community has had now a year of everyday fighting, and yet it has still not come up as a group at high level to stop to engage with the warring parties and stop the fighting.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me in the studio are the political editor of the Daily Mirror, John Stevens, and the journalist and broadcaster, Carolyn Quinn. OK, let's go straight to The Observer. Interesting story here and an interesting take. Let's pull it up. Front page of The Observer. Private school numbers up despite the VAT charge fears. Obviously, one of the Labour policies would be the 20% addition to the VAT to school fees. There have been a lot of articles saying that this would, well, harm, obviously, the private school sector, but also would have an impact on state schools. What do you make of this particular, the story, but the way it's written?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. We've been hearing from private schools over the last few months all these warnings that if you did get rid of their VAT exemption and they had to start charging that on fees, that you would see thousands and thousands of students being pulled out of schools and going into the state sector. And they'd been warning that parents were putting their children out in advance of Labour coming into power, or the chance of Labour coming into power, because they were worried about this. But these figures from the Department for Education show that at the moment, that doesn't seem to be the case. And the point that Labour have been making for quite a while is that school fees have gone up significantly for private schools in the last few years. And they've gone up about 50% since 2010. And there hasn't been any sort of drop in numbers. The numbers have gone up and up. And so far, these figures would suggest there won't be a big impact on the number of people going to private school if Labour do get into government.
And Keir Starmer faced questions, didn't he, in the Sky debate this week from an individual, a gentleman who said that I will lose out if my child has to leave the private school that we go to. And other parents have said we can't get a state school in our area. That's why we have to go for a private school. But Keir Starmer's been absolutely ruthless about this, and he's not ashamed to say he's going to be ruthless about it, because they definitely want to use that money, that £1.5 billion raised from imposing 20% VAT, on providing 6,500 more teachers. And he specifically mentions maths teachers, those teachers that are really, really needed in state schools.
OK, let's go to the Sunday Times. Very different sort of story there. On the front page, fury after a police car rams calf. Now, a strange one, this, and the images, and we're showing some of it on Sky. We're not showing the moment of impact. But basically, it's a police car, a Surrey police car. I think we can see bits of it now, that just hit a cow, and quite violently, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I was scrolling on my phone earlier on Twitter and came across the footage and didn't know what it was, and then watched the whole thing and then just thought, I really wish I hadn't seen that video. And I'm glad you're showing part of it on TV, because it is really horrible. The police car hits the cow, and then just as it tries to get up again, it gets hit again. And obviously...
And this is in Feltham, by the way.
This is in Feltham, this is Surrey Police. And the police were saying that the cow had been on the loose for a long time, that they thought was a risk to the public, and they tried everything they could and nothing else seems to be working. But just seeing that video, it does seem particularly heavy-handed. I'm surprised that, you know, so far we hear that the cow is being treated, that it's just got a large cut on its leg. But when you watch the video, I am just surprised that the cow survived at all. It is just horrific.
How dangerous can a calf be? The question is, what's it doing on a suburban road?
Yes,
of course.
yes.
But really, what possessed the police to think that they could ram it with their car? Did they not think that people might be watching? I mean, there are some strategic asterisks in the story, as one man shouting at the officers, what the was that? Yeah. But I think people would just be astonished what was going through their minds.
And presumably the cow would be totally panicked at this point, having been followed by the police.
Was there not a vet around that could shoot it with a dart or...
So apparently the cow is now being treated by a vet, and hopefully, you know, seems to be, you know, on the mend, apart from the cut on its leg. Anyway, so that's perhaps one of the strangest stories of the day. And now let's go to a story, well, really for tomorrow, but I suppose we can start looking forward to it today. Express page 3. And there it is, some very happy England fans. Bring it home, lads. And this is, of course, the first England game of Euro 2024, tomorrow.
Yeah, so we always start with hope. We always start with thinking that we can win, and then it maybe...
No, you got to the final last time. That's not
exactly.
bad.
Maybe let's see how it goes. But obviously, England playing Serbia tomorrow. I think we were talking before about Serbia, the 33rd best team in the world. She would hope that maybe it's a good start, but let's see.
But you just never know, do you? Because in the friendly with Iceland, which is way down in the pecking order, England, of course, lost to Iceland just very recently, playing their best team. So, I don't know, nerves can set in. You've got Harry Kane, who's desperate to win some sort of trophy, because even though he's been a brilliant goal scorer throughout his career, he's never actually brought home a medal. So he will be desperate to show that he can do it. And, of course, there are young players like Jude Bellingham, lots of focus on them. It's nerve-wracking, especially if you think you might, at the end of it, if you get through to a final, have to face penalties, because we saw what happened last time with Italy.
But got to the final, so you know,
got to the final,
well.
yeah.
I'm being told that the Daily Star have got an interesting front page on this. OK, so Nostradamus' cousin says the 3 Lions to win Euros. Don't really know where to go with that. John?
You always get some sort of mystic animal, usually. It's not just Nostradamus' actual cousin. Because we used to have, was it Paul the Octopus, who would predict whether we were going to win or not?
And haven't we got Ludwig the sausage dog is the latest addition to that. So,
do you think he'll have any impact on the spirits of the nation with the election and, you know, all sorts of other problems, and the weather, I have to say, being awful as well?
I think the election might have to take a slight backseat on some days. I think you know, whenever there's a England game or a Scotland game, I think that any politician trying to still knock doors would maybe think better of that.
And I think we'll see some pictures, won't we, of all the leaders watching the England game.
Very exciting pubs.
Carol and John, we're going to have to leave it there for now, but thank you. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, the Princess of Wales attends Trooping the Colour as she returns to royal duties following her cancer diagnosis.